Hello. Welcome to episode 0 of the new podcast called Breadcrumbs. My name is Kevin Howard, and I'm going to be your host for this podcast. The reason why I call this episode 0 is because I'm recording it the week before the official launch, which will be Wednesday, October 1st. And I want to use this time, this episode 0, to give you an overview of what I'm trying to accomplish, what we're doing here in this podcast, to go over some administrative stuff in terms of how you could support the podcast and the work I do, and to give you a more in-depth um, view of who I am. Who is this person who's hosting this podcast called Breadcrumbs? And so I hope you stick around and check out episode 0. So, breadcrumbs. That is so interesting. Why breadcrumbs as the name of the podcast? Well, I promise you, I'm not referring to the food product breadcrumbs. I'm referring to the version of breadcrumbs that represent those powerful clues that we get when we find that we're lost, like lost in the woods, and we're trying to get back to where we need to be. And this clue tips us off, jogs our memory, reminds us of how to get back where we're going. And so this podcast, Breadcrumbs, is going to be revealing certain clues that I hope jog deep memories that I have, that you have, that will illuminate the authentic people each of us are. Now, why is that important? It is I've come to understand that our cultural belief systems, which are which are framed and fortified and nourished by the prevailing virtues, values, and narratives of our society, that that this cultural belief system it obscures, it blocks from our consciousness the people we actually are, that who we actually are, how we actually function. So much of our reality is in the shadow of this cultural belief system. And so, what I'm endeavoring to do with breadcrumbs is look at the cultural belief system, look at our virtues that define us as Americans, look at our values, and look at the prevailing narratives that have helped us to understand each other, understand the world we live in, right? To look at them, to examine what is true about them so we can penetrate past this cultural belief system and remember the person behind it. Okay. So now you may be sitting there and saying, come on, Kevin. You, I know I am. Well, believe me when I say, I, like you, have been totally bought in to our cultural belief system. And I'll tell you about my journey a little bit later in this episode 0. That will show you how bought in I was to it. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of I've been there, and there's no judgment in this podcast. This is going to be a safe zone of two neighbors or a bunch of neighbors talking about things that we have gone through together and trying to glean the wisdom of those shared experiences. So that's what this podcast is going to be about. It's going to be about examining the virtues, values, and narratives that have defined how we see ourselves, each other, and the world we live in from an American perspective, because this is where I grew up. And for most of you, this is where you grew up. And for those of you who are not from America, this will give you some deep insight from of what being an American and thinking like an American and what American culture feels like to people who live in it. And so, okay, so that's basically what the podcast is going to be, the subject matter of the podcast. Now, source materials. I and I'll go over it with greater detail in the bio in terms of who I am. I wrote a book based on the steep wisdom of my experience called Onward at Last. And Atmosphere Press, a wonderful independent publishing firm located in Austin, Texas, published a book originally in December 2022. And it had about 80 social commentaries that covered areas of personal growth, spirituality, and philosophy, and economics, and politics, and world events, and COVID, and all types of things that I was endeavoring to use as the backdrop because we had experienced these things together to make the point of the podcast, which is that what if these prevailing virtues, values, and narratives that frame how we see ourselves and each other and the world that we live in, what if these sources of information were the driving force that has produced the severe vitriol that's destroying our society, our democratic institutions, and our communities because it's encouraging us to hate each other? What if those core virtues, fueled by those prevailing narratives, are the source of the vitriol? The only way for us to know that is for us to reconsider them, to see what impacts they have on the lives that we live. Okay, so I wrote a book, Onward at Last, that made that case using our shared experiences as the wellspring of information to validate what I was saying. And so that goes to the next step of what this podcast is all about. Even though we got the subject matter, now the methodology that we're using. I we are not going to use expertise and authority. I'm not going to try to convince you of something that you don't already know. You already know everything ultimately that that I'm going to illuminate that is in the shadows behind our cultural belief system. But I'm going to provide you a tremendous amount of information distilled into the core threads that makes sense of the history that led us to this moment, the key events, how they relate to each other, the sources that you can then go and validate on your own, so that we can understand, get the steep wisdom out of, of whether or not these virtues, values, and prevailing narratives are the cause of our American nightmare, are the cause for why everything seems to be falling apart. Okay? So, and so because we're going to use our shared experiences, you will not have to trust me. You will not have to say, well, Kevin is an authority and therefore I should defer. No. What you're going to be asked to do is tap into your experience, what you have lived through. And when you match it with the information I'm providing, ask yourself, does this resonate with my lived experience? And if it does, that's how you know it's true. Right? Right. And you won't need to come to that conclusion because you believe Kevin Howard. You will come to that conclusion because one, you'll be able to verify the data that I give you. And two, you've actually lived it. You've lived it and it will resonate. Okay, so that's going to be the methodology of our approach. So this is going to be a safe space where I'm going to allow myself to be totally vulnerable. I'm going to bear all my biases and how I got all that. I invite you to do the same. Why? Because we're not endeavoring, this is not a conversation where I'm trying to force you to accept something, or you're trying to force me to accept something, or one of us is going to win and one of us is going to lose. No, This is a conversation where we're going to benefit from our shared experiences and the steeped wisdom that oftentimes gets hidden in that shadow behind the cultural belief system. So that's what we're doing here. All right, so that's breadcrumbs and how it's going to be. How I choose to present. Well, so much of our cultural expression today is what makes us unique. So you're looking at the screen and you see a black man. Oh my God. Okay, right. Okay. I am not going to speak out of what it is in my experience that is unique because I'm a black man. Right. No, I am going to speak out of the part of who I am as a person and the part of my lived experience that you also experience, our shared humanity. We both breathe the same air. We both require nutrient foods. We both require water, atmospheric pressure, biodiversity. There's so many, most aspects of who we are in common, right? The imbalance of our modern culture is that we've pushed the things that make us unique so far to the forefront that it made them fertile soil to be weaponized against us. And so everything that makes us unique in America, man, woman, race, ethnicity, religion, whatever it is, party, political party affiliation, political ideology, whatever makes you unique and interesting has been weaponized against somebody else, and is it is the soil, is the nutrient for the vitriolic society that we live in. That's not the space we're going in. So today, when I give you my real background, right, that's about the last time that I'm going to push that stuff forward. And this is all about using our shared humanity, which represents most of our personality, which represents most of our reality, right? This is about using that space that we can see ourselves in to find the wisdom, to find the breadcrumbs that's going to lead us back to building lives that make sense again, and ultimately building communities that make sense again, and then ultimately building a society that makes sense again. Because I can tell you this much, and I'll speak about this in that bio section coming up. One of the truths that I came to realize when I had the crisis moment in my life is that most of the truth I came to understand, most of the things that were real and truthful, is in they actually happened, and I it were coming from my lived experience, and that most of the cultural belief system is not true. It's a story. It's a construct. And so, and yet I was making all my decisions based on the cultural belief system. Well, okay, we will have those conversations. So, in terms of how I present the podcast, no, this is not going to be professional set. I invested in the best webcam out there, bar none, right? So that you could see me clearly and see all the imperfections. Right, right. Okay. I invested in a good mic. And so you could see me and hear me. We're sitting in my home office. Now, I just want you to know, just from a personal thing, I love simple. I'm much more minimalistic when it comes to my workspace. So I don't put a lot of pictures on the wall that I'm going to get distracted by. I want quiet because I do deep analytical work. I do a lot of writing and stuff like that. I have a window over here so I can look outside, but I don't want to be distracted. So you see the printer in the corner. Okay. This is, and this will be the space where we will have this conversation. Why? Because this is actually who I am. This is actually where I work, right? This is an authentic expression of who I am. And by showing you that and not putting up the blue screen and not having all this, having, my master's degree, textbooks behind me. So I'm like, I'm not fronting here. This is an authentic conversation. So this is how it's going to be. That means that the podcast is going to look different. It's going to look like you're talking to your neighbor. And that's what I want it to be because you are. And that's the manner in which we're going to address each other. Further, this is not intended, despite episode 0, where I'm going to be doing all the talking, this is not intended to be a monologue. This is intended to be an interactive conversation. But the interactive nature of it is going to start with you responding in the comments after I post an episode. That's where it begins. Because I'm going because if you write something that's constructive in there, that is a part of this conversation, I promise you, I'm going to be responding to you. Okay? So that's part of that's where the start of the interaction occurs. And the more you connect with me through that interaction, the deeper your participation is going to become. Okay. Now, at this point, I should then go to a little bit of the administrative parts because this is where your participation can increase. So, the podcast is going to be made available for free. The video version on YouTube, the audio version on Spotify, and somehow or another, I think I can do the video version on Patreon, but I'm not sure about the Patreon part yet. But I'm going to ask you to join the Breadcrumbs community and to be a paying subscriber to the community. And before I get into those details, I'm going to explain to you, again, full transparency. Why am I asking you to pay for content that is available for free? Right? Because again, I'm not going to charge, there's no paywalls on the podcast. Okay. The reason why I'm asking you to participate both in your comments and then contribute if you find value in the content is because this is what I am doing for a living. And why? I made plenty of money as a commercial banker. You will find out in my bio. So I could spend my time as a banker making money. But as far as I'm concerned, and what I came to learn, that's just contributing to the problem, right? I could spend my time investing money. I came out of the investment world. That contributes to the problem, right? Once I realized, once I remembered who I am, once I penetrated the veil of my cultural belief system, it empowered me to reorganize my life so that the time that I spend, I do serving that person, serving who I authentically am. And so my job now, my career, my mission, both in my writing of my book, in this podcast, and I go on many podcasts as a guest, is to help curate a new prevailing narrative that aligns with the people we are behind this cultural belief system. That's my mission. That's my job. So we live at a time where if you don't make money, you don't eat. So that's why I'm asking you, if this is value to you, become a member of the community. So it's happening over on Patreon. You could search for the podcast, Breadcrumbs, dot, 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 a podcast for people who know it's not working. That's it. Okay, so here is the levels of membership. Standard membership is $10 a month. And if you purchase an annual subscription, it'll be $100. So you'll get a discount. Okay. If you, this next level is the pay it forward member who could afford to pay $20 a month, but the annual is only $150. So big discount. The reason why we have a pay it forward membership is because there are many of us who need this content, who would benefit from this content, who would benefit from the conversation, can't afford to pay the $10 a month. So we're going to offer a partial scholarship of $5 a month. And for those people who cannot pay the $5 a month, I'm asking them to reach out to me, email me, put a comment, on when I post an episode and say, I want to be a part of your Patreon community, but my financial condition doesn't allow me to pay even the $5 a month. And for that person, they get a full scholarship. And so the pay it forward members who can afford to pay the $20 or the $150 a year, $20 a month or $150 a year, and me will support and gladly support people who want to participate, want to contribute to this community, but just don't have the financial means to do so. Okay. The additional tier of membership is the founding members. And that's for people who really see the value in what we're trying to do and why this conversation is important and timely and how impactful it will have in the lives of people who really engage in this conversation. And so for those people, again, of greater means, their membership level is $50 a month, but the annual is $250. So again, significant discount on 12 months at $50, right? Okay. So what do you get additional? Since I already told you the podcast is not behind a paywall. Well, as I said, I Atmosphere Press published my book of Onward at Last, originally in December 2022. But inspired by the false narratives of the 2024 presidential election, I wrote a new edition with a new chapter called America at the Crossroads. 21 new commentaries that that chronicled from the beginning of from January 2024 through that primary season, through the ridiculous debates, through the conventions, into the general election, to the day we elected Donald Trump. And those commentaries are in the new edition. Atmosphere Press released the new edition in October 2024. So for each level of membership, so if you are scholarship member, a partial scholarship member, or standard member, I have prepared a summary version of my book in PDF format for book clubs because the content is deep. And so, book clubs don't need to go through the whole book, for example. Okay. But it's 35 pages and it's a great summary format, perfect for book clubs. That PDF will be made available for free if you join as a standard member, a partial scholarship member, or a full scholarship member. Okay. Also, because you're a Patreon member, you get to email me directly. Unlike the comments on YouTube or Spotify that I can respond to, that's not a direct email. On Patreon, you get to email me directly for a much more interactive conversation. And in that context, I am inviting you as you engage in this conversation, and this is the increased participation I'm talking about that I am inviting you to engage in. So the initial conversation is the comments outside of below where I post the episodes. The next level is the emails directly when you are a member of, of the Patreon Breadcrumbs community. Then you're contacting me directly. Now, the next level of your social engagement, your communication engagement is, you're going to be inspired. You have something to say. You have thoughtful and meaningful content. The biggest problem with our social discourse, how we talk about national issues, regional issues, local issues, is that we're always talked to. Most of us are never consulted, are never engaged, are never participant in the conversations about the things that affect our lives. What we get is all these podcasts, all these news shows, all these commentaries, and it's reserved for the chattering class who only platform themselves. Right. Try to penetrate that veil if you are just a regular person who's impacted by the things we're talking about, right? But try to have something to say. Try to get into the conversation. You can't. And if you're like me, most of the time, most of the time when you hear these conversations, they don't, they're in the bubble. They don't live lives like we live. And so therefore, how they are affected by the things that affect us are different. And their solutions and how they prioritize a lot of these problems are different than how we would because of how it actually impacts our lives. So it is overdue for us to be participant in the conversations. And that is what we're going to do here on Breadcrumbs. So when you join the Breadcrumbs Patreon community and you have direct email access to me, and because you are engaged in our discussions through your comments and your emails, you now have content that you want to offer that would benefit the community. I'm inviting you to pitch me on that content. Say, Kevin, we need to do a podcast on X, Y, and Z. This is my background in this area. This is my basic thoughts on it because I'm not pre screening nothing. You be you, and I want that. I'm inviting that. Okay, great. You pitch me on your idea and why you think it would be beneficial to the community. We have that conversation. And believe me, if we agree that that's something that we need to be putting out to the broader community, we are going to invite you on the podcast. And you're going to have your screen and your laptop, hopefully, and we'll work it out if you don't have it. If you don't have it, we will work this out. But the fact is that we will invite you onto the podcast so you could be a participant and bring that invaluable information that never seems to enter the conversation when we turn on our TVs or our radios or go to these other stylized podcasts. Okay. Okay. So that's the third level. Okay. So back to the various memberships. So as I said, one benefit you get as a scholarship member, a partial scholarship member, and a standard member is you get the book club summary version of my book, Onward at Last, 2024 Presidential Election Edition. And oh, by the way, I just want to mention because it was important. The new edition has a foreword written by John Fullerton. John Fullerton is an amazing man. He is a former Wall Street banker. Forgive him. He found he found that he needed to move out of that. So he left Wall Street back in 2001, and he went on a whole immersive journey. And now he founded the Capital Institute, and that he's engaged in scholarship on the new economics, an economics that aligns with how sustaining living systems function, right? Because the economics that we have right now is destroying the ecology that sustains us. But so he has created a whole body of knowledge and a whole curriculum on regenerative economics and regenerative finance. And he comes at it well informed out of Wall Street and everything. Brilliant guy. He's a member of the Club of Rome. So it was a crazy get for me to get him to write the foreword to my book. But it's because I took his regenerative economics course and we connected there. This is how humans actually connect, is that even if you're in different circles, If you resonate, it's amazing what you can do together. So John wrote the foreword to my book. And so that is also, of course, in the book club version. Okay. So we've covered the additional bonus content that standard members, scholarship members, and partial scholarship members get. For the Pay It Forward members, they will get the 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 book club version of the summary version of Onward at Last, 2024 presidential election edition, and they will get the EPUB, the ebook version, which I want to every once in a while. I won't do it often, I promise. Pat myself on the EPUB version one, the bronze, the 2025 bronze IPI for best adult nonfiction book from the Independent Book Publishers Award. So believe me when I say I was so blown away, so grateful to them for that. And so the Pay It Forward members get the ebook for free along with the book club version for free. The founding members, because they're all that. Oh, no, because of their additional contribution. We got to have fun with this. they get a signed copy of the paperback book and they get the EPUB. They get the signed copy of the paperback book and they get the book club summary version, you know, and I'll print it out and sign that copy too if they want. Okay. So those are the extra little perks that people get. But your primary contribution is to actually support me in a living income because this is what I'm doing, not just this podcast, not just selling the books. I have a consulting business and now we're going to transition into the bio that I am working on sustainability issues, the housing affordability crisis, and all those things, right? And by the way, Trump is not helping, but we'll get into that too. And so that's why I'm charging to join the community. Okay. But I want you all to know I'm not asking you to do anything that doesn't resonate with you. I'm not asking you to do anything that you don't see adds value to your life. Everything I provide, whether it's through this podcast or it's even my book, if you go to my book's website, which is https colon forward slash onwardatlast.com, and you look at the blog tab on that site, all my commentaries are available for free because this is a passion project for me. But because this is how I'm spending most of my time, it also needs to be a source of sustaining revenue. So that's why I charge fees to get the book into the most popular distribution networks, Amazon, you know, the bookstores, Barnes and Noble, everything else. And that's why I charge for the Patreon, for our Patreon breadcrumbs community, right? But nothing will be paywalled. And it's only if you can afford it. And for those who can't afford it, I'm giving you every opportunity to fully participate at every level for free or for what you can contribute. So this is a voluntary thing. So won't be pitching that. Those links will always be in the episode description notes so that you can always reference them. But this is not going to be a hard sell stuff. So don't worry about that. So now administrative stuff is aside. Let us get to is Kevin Howard and why is he up here telling me all this stuff? No, no. Okay. So yes, my name is Kevin Howard. I will be 60 years old on November 30th of this year. And yeah, I'm a second generation American. My mother was born in Panama, and her parents had a dream to send, as you know, her father died, and his last dream was to have one of the kids be sent to the States to pave the way for the other kids to come over. And they chose my mother. And so she came over at like 14. And we had some family here in the States, in the Bronx, New York. And she went to high school and she transitioned and she learned English. Spanish was her first language, the whole 9 yards. And oh God, she is she's an amazing woman, my mother, Andrea Scott. And so yeah, she got married at 20, you know, to my dad, Reuben Howard II. And they had two kids. My brother Reuben in 1963, baby boomer, and me. She calls me baby boy, so forgive her. I love her. I just can't. I just love it. So I'm baby boy, but I was born in '65, so I am in the oldest year of Generation X and proud of it. Okay. Okay. So I was born in '65. So I grew up in the Bronx, New York. My parents got divorced when I was 5 and my brother was 7, 1970. My father went away, never saw him again. That's all right. We got to make our choices. So my mother raised me and my brother in the Bronx. And that woman, I'm telling you, she is the divine's truest sign of love in this world for me. She raised us. We had a great youth. We didn't have a lot, but we had enough. She went back to school. She became a registered nurse. She became a naturalized citizen. She loved America and she raised us to love America. Why? Because she understood the difference. She understood the privilege of being born here versus being born somewhere else. She was born in Panama, right? She understood the difference and she instilled that into me and my brother. So when by the time I was 18, 12 years of Catholic school, thank you nuns, because I can tell you, growing up in the Bronx, that those nuns kept me straight. And and yes, I have the wounds to, as signs of uh, uh, medals of honor. You could, but thank you, nuns, and so 12 years of Catholic school. Once I was bursting at the seams to get out here, and because I totally bought in, totally loved America, totally believed in the American dream. So I enlisted in the United States military at 18. I wasn't even 18 yet. Yeah, I enlisted November 15th, 1983. So I would turn 18 in 15 days. but and here I was going from the Bronx, New York to Anniston, Alabama. Welcome to the South, boys. And I started my military training and I served 4 years active duty and loved it. Loved serving my country. And the thing about military service though is that you have to while you're in training, they don't tell you, but you realize what you're training for. So you have to ask yourself, under what circumstances would I kill or be killed? You know, under what circumstances? Because I'm not going around, it's not a video game. I'm not going around killing people just because, okay. And I had to resolve this as a young man because the time to decide that is not when the balloon goes up and the president says, it's time to go, right? When the balloon goes up and it's time to go, it's time to go. Right. So you part of your preparation is okay, under what circumstances can I do this? So I did. And I decided I would do it to protect my way of life. This America gave me everything I have, made me everything I am. And to protect America, yeah, I'm not a killer. But if that's what it took to protect America, that's what I would do. And I'm not a masochist, but if that's what it took to protect America, I would gladly sacrifice my life for that cause. And that's the decision I made at 18. Yeah, kids do the damnedest things. But, so I served my active duty service. And by the way, I also married my high school sweetheart. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was beautiful. At 18, yes. There was no kids involved up front, so it wasn't that. It was just love. It was just love. And so I served my 4 years active duty in the military. Came out of the military after 4 years. By the way, during that service, I served as a member of NATO. I served from 83 to 87. I was, President Reagan was my commander in chief. And, I was there when he tipped the balance of power in Europe between NATO and the Warsaw Pact by putting M1 tanks and M2 Abrams across Europe. I served in the largest combat brigade in Europe at Erzkazan, and in Kirchgorns, Germany, and served. Colin Powell was the Corps Fifth Corps commander when he was a lieutenant general. This is before Reagan plucked him out to be out of active military service to be assistant national security advisor. But this is before that, and so it was a heady time to be in Europe. I got to drive those M1 tanks. I wasn't a tanker, but I was in an armor unit. I was a nuclear biological chemical NCO, training soldiers how to survive under contaminated environments because we felt that that's what the Soviets would do. They would use tactical nukes or biological or chemical warfare to overcome our technological advantages. Okay, so that was my military service. Came out, went to college, undergrad, you know, focus my focus in undergrad was economics, applied economics in particular. Went to graduate school. My focus was um, constitutional law and contracts. Didn't want to be a lawyer. What I wanted to do, always wanted to be, was a banker. Forgive me. So look at, like I said, I was bought in. And then I embarked on well, before I embarked on the career, I did a year's duty, a 1 year stint as a FEMA lead disaster assistance loan officer for the Northridge earthquake from 1994, from January 1994 to January of 1995. One of the most amazing experiences of my life when FEMA was FEMA. So, we will speak as we go through narratives and stuff like that as to what FEMA used to be and and what it has become, right? But that's when we actually helped people. That's when we restored people's lives, before. And so I did that for a year, and then I started my commercial banking career, and I passionately loved it, and I became really good at it. You know, for me, the juice was to help a person to customize financial services in a way to help a young entrepreneur, a small business owner, grow their business, create jobs, achieve their American dream. This became how I achieved my American dream, right? And it was amazing, and I was successful. And by the time went through my 40s, went through my 30s, excuse me, by the time I just started to hit my 40s, I had hit it. I had achieved the idyllic American middle class dream. I had the house, I had the car, I had the money in the bank, I had a beautiful wife, I had the kids, it, you know. But one day I woke up and it was a scary moment because I mean, all I had was clear blue skies. I had earned it. I was at the spot where my whole life was heading in this direction, and I had arrived. And it should have been coasting. It should have been only good at that point. But you know what I discovered? Is this all life is? Felt empty, devoid of purpose. What was on my agenda? What was my future going to be about? It was to be about getting another deal done, making another deposit in the bank account, diversifying my investments. That meant nothing to me. Now, I wasn't ungrateful to have a nice house. I wasn't ungrateful to have the toys, but there was no meaning. So I'm like, okay, well, clearly, I didn't know who I was. Well, how is this possible? So I got to tell you, it was a crisis moment for me. Yeah, it was around 40, so it was that too. When you can't drive the lane like you used to, you start wondering, oh my God, it's going downhill for. But no, it was beyond that aspect of it. It was really an emotional, spiritual crisis moment because I had achieved everything. I built a whole life to get to this spot, and I found it to be meaningless. without purpose. So clearly I didn't know who I was. So promise you I didn't jump in the car and leave everything behind, and just go drive out to New Mexico somewhere. No, I went on a journey to find out, well, if everything I had done up to this point had led me to a spot where I realized that this doesn't mean anything to me other than thank you very kindly for the nice things, then clearly I didn't know what my values were. I didn't know what Kevin Howard's priorities were. In fact, I didn't know Kevin Howard. But what did I know? That cultural belief system, my defining virtues as an American: freedom, independence, self interest, fundamental right to advance, to pursue my own happiness, right? Self interest. In competition, we compete in order to get the resources to take care of ourselves and our family. And as long as we compete fair and square by the rules, to the winner goes the spoils. I believed it. I lived it. I did it. Okay. But what did it get me? I believed the enemies I was told: the Soviet Union, the Russians, the terrorists, the them, the Iraqis, the Taliban, bin Laden. I believed I was a banker. I believed that in the Great Recession, that, oh my God, I guess, when Mr. Santini stood up, in what was that, in April of 2009, in the Chicago, you know, mercantile exchange or whatever, and raised his fist on CNBC and talked about greedy people who bought too much house with their gold-plated bathroom fixtures and stuff like that. And why should hardworking people like us, bankers, right, pay for them, bail them out? I believe that shit. I did. Hmm. Well, in getting to know myself, and getting to look in my heart, and getting to finally asking Kevin Howard, well, what do I value? What makes me want to throw my legs over the edge of the bed and hit the ground running? Well, it wasn't the cultural belief system. It wasn't those virtues. And so I said, okay, then what was it? And what it was, well, how about this? What I did was, and it took me, just be candid, it took me 10 years. One of the points of this podcast is it don't need to take you 10 years, you know, but it took me 10 years, right? To, and I started with the most basic thing. What's the most undeniable aspects of our lives? It's the physical reality, not the emotional, which is esoteric, or the spiritual, what you believe is esoteric. Physically, right here. Okay. I started with, what do I need to survive? Okay. You don't need a PhD to figure out what you need to survive, because you're surviving every day. So, what is it that you do that allows you to survive? And one of the things I found is, well, this body right here does not produce the things it needs to survive. Now, again, that's not going to be a revelation to you, but welcome to the shadow, because I know, as I'm sitting here, that for 40 years it never occurred to me. It never occurred to me that this body does not produce the things I need to survive. And the reason why it didn't occur to me is because my cultural belief system, the virtues that define me as an American, encourage me to think of myself as free, as independent. Okay? If I'm independent, if my aspiration is to be independent, what that means is I don't need anybody else. This right here got it covered. Guess what? That is a abject lie. Hey, I didn't know that. But the thing is, I didn't know that here because what comes through our minds, the filter, how we make choices, how we perceive, right, is the lens of that cultural belief system. And so my aspiration, the measure and stick of who I am is my freedom, my independence. I'm an American, by the way. Okay. So, okay. So when I realized, well, hold it now, what about me is independent? Well, I did find something. I make choices, and I don't need all of you to make my choices. But is that independence? Because the thing that's certainly a sovereign expression. It's certainly an individual expression. But then, but is it independence? What makes independence independence is not that you decide something, right? Is that you're capable of functioning self-sufficiently. You're capable of functioning independent of anything and anyone else. If you look at your hand, and by the way, I wrote a commentary about this. I'll reference it in the notes for this episode 0. If you look at your hand, your fingers can move individually. That's us. Oh, well, stick with me for a minute. We make all our choices. But guess what? Just like the fingers can't survive without the palm, if I cut this thumb off and put it on the table, it's not it will stop wiggling. And it won't be able to function. Well, okay. For all our aspirations of independence as Americans, if the sun goes out, game over. If the atmospheric pressure of this planet changes, game over. If the trees stop inhaling our carbon dioxide and exhaling oxygen, game over. It doesn't matter what choices we make if the ecology that supports human life doesn't exist, then human life doesn't exist. Okay? So so yeah, we make choices, we create constructs, we do all types of amazing things as humans, but we do it as a part of something greater than ourselves. We do it purely as a function of the humanity that produces everything that we need to survive that we can't produce for ourselves, the natural environment that provides everything that we need to survive that we can't produce for ourselves, right? We all those things are necessary. And that's what I discovered when I just asked the question is how do I survive every day? And so when you realize that the core of your cultural belief system that you used as a lens to see yourself, to see other people, and to understand the world around you has information in it that's not true, that does not align with how you actually live your life, then the only way, that's how you build a whole life like I did, based on things that don't really resonate with who you are. Because I can tell you this much, once I realized that I don't eat unless thousands of people I will never know, do what they do so that I can take some money out of my pocket and go buy some food, whether to cook it or it's already prepared. Once I realized that's the case and that I really can't produce my own food, right? I mean, it takes fertile soil, takes millions of years, right? Earth produces that. That's millions of years of critters decomposed to make fertile soil for the nutrients that sustain my body. So even farmers are not making the food. The earth and the farmers working together and the weather make the food. Okay? All right. So if I realize that I can't survive without all those people who are making contributions that benefit themselves but also benefit me, how exactly does the virtue of self-interest serve my best interest? Right? It changed everything. It made me reconsider the measuring stick of success, the measuring stick of good, the measuring stick of right. Because what is good, what is right, is what is true. What actually serves you, right? And I started with just the physical reality. And so as soon as I start realizing this, I was inspired to write. Now, there is, I've given you my career arc and my family arc. So let me take a moment to give you my faith journey that became a spiritual journey. And again, this is not intending, this is transparency. This is not intending to convince you of anything. So my mother raised me as a Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school. And I'm deeply analytical as you will become really exposed to, deeply analytical. I just love that shit. So, you know, I read the scripture. I was a kid, I read the scripture. And I was a very prayerful kid because I had discerned out of the scripture that it was important to have communication with God, with the divine. And that's how you did it. You prayed. And I was passionate in it. I mean, I wasn't a fundamentalist of some sort, but I was passionate in it. And that I brought it into my life. And so, and so I will say that for most of my life, that prayerful conversation with God had been within the context of a faith journey. I just assumed he existed, he or she. God doesn't have a gender, but you don't want to call God it. So there's limits of English. We need something beyond gender to characterize, right? God. Okay, but in my what happens in your 40s? I don't know what's going on, but in my 40s in 2016, I was I was running on this I was living in Carlsbad, North County, San Diego, beautiful, beautiful. And I was running along the ocean and I got this inspiration in my I was, I sometimes have this prayerful conversation while I'm running because me running is like peace, it's like serenity. So I'm running and I'm having this conversation with the divine. And he says to me, it's time for you to set aside. It's time for you to set aside all the religious names that you have for me. Because the religious tradition is to create this hierarchy. And certainly out of Catholicism. So there's God. And then there's the clergy. And then there's the saints, the, those amongst us who are almost perfect. I mean, only Jesus is perfect, right? Almost perfect. And these tiers have closer relationship with God. So that's why Catholics actually pray to the saints. Hey, could you appeal to God and excuse me, there I go again. Ask God if he can help me do this. Okay. Because there's this hierarchy. But here was the divine in my head saying, It's time to shed that because I'm here to tell you we are one. And I'm like, I almost stopped running. What do you mean we're one? Everything I understood my faith journey is is that you're so great and I'm so small. And that I'm flawed. Now you made me this way, but nonetheless, I'm flawed and you're not flawed. So he said, yeah, he said, no, that's human ego. We don't have to go down that path in this bio. But the point is I was instructed to move away from this idea that God is so great and we're so small, that we're actually part of one collective, that we're actually equal, that we're actually one, that God is within us, that the divine is within us. And so that shifted, and this is what I was asked. It shifted my faith journey into a truth journey, a spiritual journey. Because spirituality, for me, what I'm referencing, is what is true about what we are experiencing in this life journey that helps us to understand what is this all about? What is our purpose here? Because if you can find your purpose and you live your purpose, this produces the ultimate experience that this life has to offer, and it's called fulfillment. So I shed the faith journey where I'm taking a leap of faith and I'm merely accepting a series of principles that other people wrote down into a spiritual journey where I'm looking for what is true about everything I experience in order to make sense of it, in order to give me an idea of what am I supposed to be doing? How do I find my place? In what way can I find purpose that leads to fulfillment? And then, the rest of my life happened. But so when I shifted to the spiritual journey, that informed my book. That informed the commentaries I wrote. After the 10 years of getting to know who I am, starting with the most physical, basic level, how do I survive? This allowed me to start peeling back the layers of who I am. And the commentaries map out that journey. But it maps out that journey in a way that can speak to you. Why? Because it's not based on the unique path that I took. It's based on the shared experiences that we have. It's based on the shared humanity that we have. So that it's not that you need to come through what I came through to remember who I am, because you have within your own memory who you are. And it's really just about me being a breadcrumb clue that will jog your memory. Where did I leave the keys? That will jog your memory and have you penetrate the cultural belief system that is the lens by which you see the world, by which I have seen the world. What this process is going to be about is cleaning that lens so that we see ourselves, we see each other, we see the world as it is, not through the lens of bias or ideology, but simply as it is, because that is what truth is. Truth is what happened, actually happened, not an interpretation. Right? Okay. And so this is the measuring stick that we're going to use to explore these virtues and these prevailing narratives so that we can develop the practice, the clues that helps us to penetrate past them and discover who we are. So that's my bio. Most of the conversation will not be on what makes me special because that's the least relatable part to you. Most of our conversation is going to be about what makes us common. how we are kindred, how we are in fact family. And we're going to speak out of that lens. And so I hope you join me. Thank you for this time. I'm looking at my clock right now. We have spent an hour and 5 minutes. I think that's pretty good. I hope it's been worth your while. We start the journey together. We start the conversation together next week on Wednesday, October 1st, for episode 1 of Breadcrumbs. You take care. I'll see you there.